Final Fantasy has some of the most absurdly overpowered items in RPG history, weapons that break damage formulas, accessories that make you literally unkillable, and gear so rare that entire communities have spent decades just trying to find it. Today I'm breaking down the 12 most powerful items across the entire franchise, starting with the one accessory every single Final Fantasy player recognizes on sight, Ribbon. The Ribbon sounds like the least intimidating item in gaming. It's a hair accessory. You put it on and it protects you from every status ailment in the game. Poison, silence, confusion, petrify, doom. All of them. Gone. Here's the thing, this little piece of fabric has appeared in nearly every mainline Final Fantasy game, making it the single most recurring accessory in the franchise. And in almost every one of those games, finding it is a nightmare. In FF7, most casual players finish the entire game without ever seeing one. In FF5, only 2 ribbons exist per playthrough. You have a 4-person party, that's 2 people protected and 2 people praying, but the real cost isn't rarity, it's the accessory slot. Equipping a ribbon means giving up raw damage or game-changing relics, which is, you know, not ideal. That trade-off makes the ribbon the perfect baseline for this list, but protection only gets you so far when the next item lets you hit everything twice. Genji Glove. If the ribbon is the item that keeps you alive, the Genji Glove is the item that makes sure nothing else stays alive either. 1 accessory slot. That's all it takes. Equip this thing and suddenly your character is holding 2 weapons instead of 1, swinging both every single turn. The damage increases effectively 75 to 100% depending on the game. That's not a bonus, that's a second character. The glove shows up across FF5, FF6, FF9, and FF12, and it does the same thing every time, but FF5 is where it gets truly stupid. Pair it with 2 Excaliburs or dual Spellblades, and you're looking at one of the highest damage per turn setups in the entire franchise. Optional super bosses meant to be grueling endurance fights? Dead in 2 to 3 turns. Cool. Here's the thing though, you get this from Gilgamesh, the franchise's most beloved recurring goofball, which means one of the most broken items in Final Fantasy history is literally a hand-me-down from a guy who can't stop collecting fake swords. I don't know what to tell you, nobody unequips it once they put it on, but if you think doubling your damage output sounds excessive, wait until you hear about a sword that requires you to speedrun an entire game just to hold it. Excalibur 2. Final Fantasy IX is a 40-hour game minimum. It's a slow, story-driven, take your time and smell the roses kind of experience. So naturally, the developers hid the strongest weapon in the entire game behind a challenge that requires you to reach the final dungeon in under 12 hours of total playtime. Let me explain. Excalibur 2 is Steiner's ultimate weapon. 107 base attack power, hits 9,999 damage per swing during limit breaks. It is by a significant margin the hardest hitting weapon in the game. There's only 1 copy per playthrough, it cannot be duplicated, it cannot be stolen, and the only way to get it is to essentially speedrun a JRPG that was designed to be savored. If you fail at any point, you start the entire game over, from scratch. Players have reported spending 50+ hours of real-world time attempting this, skipping every cutscene, optimizing every encounter, memorizing every transition, all for a single sword. The community is permanently split on this one. Half the fanbase calls it rewarding dedication, the other half just stares blankly and asks why anyone would design a weapon this way. Both sides are correct, its meme status alone makes it legendary. But if you think a brutal time limit is a weird design choice, wait until you see what happens when Final Fantasy lets a single accessory break math entirely. Catnip. Most players build their party around control. You pick your abilities, you time your heals, you manage every turn like a chess match. Mog's dance command looks at all of that and says, nah, we're doing something different today. Here's how dance works, and it's beautifully stupid. You select one of Mog's learned dances, and he enters a berserk-like state where he performs one of 4 weighted attacks each turn for the rest of the battle. You cannot stop him, you cannot redirect him, you just sit there and watch a small furry creature commit random violence on your behalf. Learning every dance requires actual commitment too. Each one is tied to a specific terrain type, and Mog only learns a dance by fighting on that terrain. The veldt, snowfields, caves, forests. Each one unlocks a different moveset. That's not something you stumble into. That's a deliberate grind where you've decided, yes, I want the chaos ability, but here's where it gets fun. Some dances contain devastatingly powerful attacks weighted to appear frequently, and once Mog starts, he literally cannot be interrupted. He goes from cute utility support character to uncontrollable wrecking ball. The catch: if Mog's dance doesn't match the current battlefield terrain, there's a 50% chance he stumbles combos and the dance fails entirely. Congratulations, you've just wasted your turn on a furry pinball machine hitting nothing. It's the ultimate coin flip, and sometimes flipping a coin beats thinking. But if you want guaranteed power without the gambling, the next item delivers exactly that: Aero Drink. You'd think the most broken thing in a Final Fantasy game would be some ancient sword forged by gods, or a crystal containing the soul of a dead king. Nope, it's a beverage. You just drink it and suddenly you're meaningfully stronger. That's it. That's the whole mechanic. Hero Drink shows up in FF7 as a consumable that boosts your stats by 30%. Attack, defense, magic, the works, all from one little bottle. But here's the thing, you can use multiple hero drinks in the same fight, stacking them on the same character turn after turn, meaning you can spend your first few rounds of a super boss encounter just chugging these things like a frat kid at a tailgate, and by round 4 your party is hitting like a freight train while the boss just has to deal with it. Slap a few hero drinks on Cloud with his limit break ready to go, and you've turned an already dangerous character into something the game simply was not balanced around. You're not even strategizing at that point, you're just watching numbers go up. The best part? You can buy them from vending machines at the Gold Saucer for 100 GP. No hidden dungeon, no 40-hour side quest. Just walk up to a glorified arcade prize counter, purchase victory in a bottle, and leave. But if you think a consumable item is hard to justify using, wait until we talk about the one item every player hoards and never actually drinks. Megalixir, you have one. You've always had one. You will never, ever use it. This is the universal Final Fantasy experience. The Megalixir fully restores every party member's HP and MP to maximum in a single use. It's the nuclear option, the break glass in case of emergency item that spans FF4, FF5, FF6, FF7, FF9, FF10, FF12, and FF14. And in every single one of those games, you will finish the final boss with it still sitting in your inventory, untouched, pristine, completely useless. Here's the thing, you only get 1 to 3 copies per playthrough. You can't buy them, you can't craft them, so naturally your brain goes, this is too valuable to waste on this fight, I'll save it for a harder one. And then every fight becomes not the right one. You hoard it like a dragon sitting on a single gold coin, convinced the real emergency is always one boss away. But here's where it gets beautiful. In FF5, players discovered you can abuse save load mechanics to duplicate Megalixirs infinitely. The single most precious consumable in the game, duplicated into a bottomless pile. Suddenly the thing you refuse to use once becomes the thing you use every single turn. Difficulty? Gone. Your entire personality around saving it for later, obliterated by a glitch. The purists call that cheating. The pragmatists say they're actually having fun. Both are right, and neither will ever agree, but at least the Megalixir argument is just philosophical. The next item on this list does something far more mechanically disgusting. Gold Armlet. On paper, this thing is the most boring item in Final Fantasy VI. A relic that reduces physical damage by 50%. Cool, riveting. You could put that description on a pamphlet and use it to cure insomnia. But here's where it gets complicated. The Gold Armlet doesn't just reduce damage on its own, it doubles the effectiveness of every other relic you're wearing at the same time. That's not a typo. Whatever your second relic slot is doing, the Gold Armlet looks at it and goes, yeah, let me just crank that up for you. The game's balance was clearly not designed around this interaction, because the stacking gets absurd almost immediately. Equip 2 gold armlets and you're already looking at roughly 75% physical damage reduction across the board. That alone is stupid, but combine them with the barrier change relic and a healing focused turn, and suddenly enemies are hitting you for 1 to 3 damage per attack. 1 to 3. You could get hit harder by a strong breeze. The best part? No stat penalties. Weighs nothing. You can grab one from the Figaro Castle weapon shop like you're picking up groceries. Most casual players walk right past it because nothing about the gold armlet screams this will break your entire game. It just quietly sits there waiting for someone to read the fine print. And speaking of items that reward players who actually pay attention, wait until you hear what Ragnarok does to the concept of action economy. Ragnarok, every RPG ever made, is built on one sacred rule. You get one action per turn. You can attack, you can cast a spell, you can use an item. Pick one, that's the deal. Ragnarok looked at that deal and said, absolutely not. This weapon shows up across Final Fantasy 3, 6, 7, 8, 11, and 14, making it one of the most recurring weapon names in the entire franchise. But its FF6 version is the one that broke people's brains. It comes packing 255 base attack power, which is already absurd, but the real problem is its special proc effect. Every time you swing with the fight command, there's a 25% chance Ragnarok independently casts Flare on the target. No input required, no extra action spent. Let me be clear about what that means. Your character swings Ragnarok for normal damage. Then, 1 out of every 4 hits, the sword just decides to also nuke the enemy with Flare. You didn't ask for it, you didn't select it from a menu. The sword just woke up and chose violence on its own, hitting for roughly 5,000 to 7,000 bonus damage on top of your regular attack. Equipable by Terra, Locke, Edgar, and Celes, this thing turns any of them into a coin flip catastrophe. Every single physical attack becomes a lottery where the prize is a free Flare to the face. You're not choosing between offense and magic anymore. You're getting both stacked on the same action, and the weapon is literally cheating at its own game. But if you think free extra damage is broken, wait until you see the relic that lets you cast every spell twice. Soul of Thamasa. Here's a question that has haunted Final Fantasy VI players for decades. Not how do I beat the final boss, or where's the best grinding spot. The question is, who gets the Soul of Thamasa? Because only one exists, ever. One copy per playthrough, non-replaceable, non-duplicable. You get it, you put it on somebody, and that's the decision you live with forever. Which is, you know, not ideal for people who already spend 40 minutes choosing a starter Pokemon. To even get the thing, you have to climb the Cultist Tower in the World of Ruin and beat Rexall, a tower where you can only use magic, filled with enemies that want you dead, capped off by a boss that literally hides inside your own party members. But once you survive that, you're rewarded with a relic that cuts MP costs in half for whoever wears it. Every spell, every summon, half cost, all the time, 0 stat penalties. That alone would be ridiculous. But here's where it gets genuinely stupid. Combine it with the gold hairpin and you're looking at MP costs reduced to almost nothing. Slap both on a caster and congratulations. You've just created a walking spell engine that never runs dry. Boss fights that should be wars of attrition become casual. The boss is just standing there soaking Ultima over and over while your mage treats MP like an infinite resource, pulling the encounter apart like they're unwrapping a sandwich. The entire balance of endgame magic shifts around one relic slot on one character, and you only get to make that choice once. But if you think a single defensive relic is broken, wait until you see what happens when Final Fantasy VI lets you attack 4 times in one turn. Master Scroll. Here's a philosophical question for you. What if the best way to play a game is to stop playing it entirely? The Moogle Charm is an FF6 relic you find in the World of Ruin, and it's exclusively for Mog. What it does is simple. It completely eliminates random encounters. Every single one. You walk through dungeons, you cross the overworld, and nothing touches you. No battles, no grinding, no interruptions. Mog just walks. And here's the thing, that's arguably better than fighting. See, in most RPGs, avoiding combat means falling behind on experience and becoming useless later. But FF6's system is generous enough that you can funnel all that saved time into progressing faster, gearing up smarter, and only fighting the battles that actually matter. Mog with the Moogle Charm turns the entire game into a hallway. You're not playing an RPG anymore. You're playing a walking simulator with a boss fight at the end of each dungeon. And it works. The community is genuinely split on this one. Half the player base calls it a design flaw because an item that removes the core gameplay loop shouldn't be this effective. The other half calls it genius because it forces you to rethink what playing optimally even means. Both sides have a point. Neither side is budging, but the reality is undeniable. You equip this relic, you skip every fight on the map, and the game literally becomes easier than if you'd engaged with it normally. That's either the most insulting item in RPG history or the most honest one. But if you think skipping the game entirely is broken, wait until you see what happens when a shield makes you completely untouchable. Zodiac Escutcheon. Let's talk about evasion, specifically the kind of evasion that makes boss fights completely pointless. The Zodiac Escutcheon is a shield in Final Fantasy XII, and in the Zodiac Age version, who can equip it depends entirely on which job licenses you've unlocked. On the surface, it looks decent. Solid defense, lightning immunity, some magic resistance. But the real story is the evasion stats, some of the highest physical and magic evasion values on any shield in the game. Let me explain why that breaks everything. If your character is passively dodging a massive percentage of incoming attacks without doing anything, the enemy now needs to land way more hits just to keep up. Not to win, just to make progress. Most bosses in Final Fantasy XII literally cannot sustain that kind of output when half their swings whiff against empty air. Long, attrition-based fights become mathematically unwinnable for the enemy. Your character character just stands there shrugging off attacks. No items consumed, no MP drained. They just exist and refuse to get hit. And here's the kicker. You get it through the Hunt Club side quest on the Fawn Coast, then buy it from the merchant for 999,999 gil. That's it. No super boss gauntlet, no absurd dungeon crawl. You hand over a mountain of gil and walk away with a shield that turns defense into a spectator sport. The contrast with something like the Excalibur hidden deep in the Great Crystal is almost funny. One requires navigating a labyrinth designed by someone who hates you. The other requires a shopping trip, but if you think passive evasion is game-breaking, wait until you see what happens when an entire armor set decides that stat caps are more of a suggestion than a rule. Onion Gear, every item on this list is powerful. Some of them break encounters, some of them break entire games. But the Onion Gear from Final Fantasy III doesn't break the game, it replaces it. The Onion Gear is a full armor set, helmet, shield, and body armor, exclusive to the Onion Knight job class. On paper, the stats look unremarkable. The Onion Knight starts as one of the weakest jobs in the game. Low stats, no real abilities. It's the default class you begin with, and the game practically begs you to switch off it immediately. But here's where it stops being reasonable. The Onion Knight's stats stay almost flat until the high levels, then skyrocket. Once you hit job level 90 and above, every stat climbs dramatically, and the Onion equipment amplifies this to an absurd degree. The Onion Sword alone has the highest attack power of any weapon in the game. Pair it with the full set, and you're not playing the same game as everyone else anymore. A single character hits 9,999 damage per swing. That same character tanks hits that would flatten any other build. That same character has access to every spell tier. You don't need a party anymore. You have one character doing the work of 4, and doing it better than 4 ever could. The community doesn't debate this one. The Onion Gear is widely acknowledged as one of the most broken item combinations in the entire Final Fantasy franchise. It's not an item set, it's a cheat code the developers put in on purpose, looked at and said, yeah, that's fine. And that's the through line of this entire list. Final Fantasy has always hidden its most absurd power fantasies behind layers of grinding and sheer stubbornness. The Onion Gear is just the purest version of that promise. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.